Good morning. This is Al Sandrick, the One Coordination Meteorologist for the National Weather Service office in Jacksonville. It's 9:30 a.m. on Friday, September the 8th, and I'm going to do a Hurricane Irma briefing for you. So currently, the official forecast for Hurricane Irma has it forecast to go up the central Florida Peninsula into southeastern Georgia. It would be passing us as a Category 1 hurricane to strong tropical storm as we get further north, say towards the Waycross area. However, we have to remember at this time that errors are fairly large associated with the forecast, and they're actually in about 100 to 125 mile range. So that actually could have a hurricane running up the east coast of Florida if the error was to be more on the eastern side of the track. Or on the other side of that coin, if the storm were to track further to the west, the storm could be moving up the west coast of Florida and into Appalachia Bay. Regardless of Irma's ultimate track, large destructive wave action and above normal astronomical tides may result in further damage to coastal infrastructure that was damaged by Hurricane Matthew if the worst impacts occur near the time of high tide on Monday. So I do want to caution you that we are within 72 hours of a potential hurricane across this area, and while we have no watchers or warnings in effect at this time, you do need to heed the advice of local emergency managers and local officials. So again, Hurricane Irma's track is forecast to be across the central Florida Peninsula. However, it could track a little bit further to the east. So we do expect strong Category 1 winds in a small area near the core of the storm along the immediate St. Johns River and the immediate ocean front. There will be a large area of tropical storm force winds in other locations, possibly destructive oceanfront surf and wave action if the worst of the impacts occur near the time of high tide. Downtown will see significant flooding if we follow this track because when the winds blow from the south, they will blow water up the St. Johns River into the downtown San Marco and Riverside areas. Of course, there's a possibility of tornadoes to the east of the storm track. Now, where we really need to be careful is while things look better with the forecast at this point, with the storm being inland and slightly weaker, it'd be very easy for that storm to run along the east coast of Florida, and then we'd be looking at a much stronger hurricane. So at this time, we do need to continue to prepare as though we might see Category 2 storm surge in northeast Florida and southeastern Georgia. Looking at this graphic, this kind of illustrates what would happen if the storm continued with an inland track. We might see hurricane force winds very, very close to the storm center, at this point say in the Gainesville area across Marion County, and then on up towards Lake City. Then we'd actually see tropical storm force winds a little bit further to the east over portions of Clay and Putnam County. We would see hurricane force winds again over the St. Johns River area where things are very open. And then once again along the immediate ocean front, we'd see the possibility of seeing hurricane force winds. Now, that would shift with any adjustment to the track to the east or west. So bear in mind, this graphic is not something that you want to take and say that's absolutely the way it's going to be. We're still 72 hours from this potential event, and there's a lot of things that can change with the forecast track and intensity of this storm. So don't concentrate too much on it, but understand if you live along the St. Johns River, along the immediate ocean front, anywhere from Sea Isle southward to Flagler Beach, and then near the core of where the storm is going to go, you could see hurricane force winds. So the earliest reasonable arrival time of tropical storm force winds is Sunday morning for northeast Florida and Sunday afternoon for southeast Georgia. Storm preparations should be completed by this time. These are the tides, and we're using a reference called mean high or high water to this. What does that mean? You know, when you're driving across the intercoastal waterway or some river and you happen to look out on a clear blue day and you look at the water and you say, wow, the water's really high today. Well, that's actually mean high or high water, and we tend to build things down to about that level. So somewhere just above mean high water in areas is about where we start to see coastal flooding. And our tides over the next couple of days are going to be above mean high or high water, and that brings us about a half a foot to about a foot below flooding levels in a lot of locations. So we're very close to flooding with high tide even if there wasn't a storm. This is the possibility of hurricane force winds, and this has been increasing over the last 24 hours. Right now, we're at about a 20 to 30% chance across Florida and about a 5 to 15% chance across southeastern Georgia. Now, that may sound extremely low until you think about it. We're 72 hours from the possible event, and actually in Georgia about 84 hours from the possible event. And those are pretty high numbers of a high consequent event. You know, we call it a hurricane for a reason, and there's a word that is actually dedicated to it in the English language. So, you know, there's no such thing as a weak hurricane, folks. But very, very rare for anyone to experience hurricane force winds in any particular location. I've been a meteorologist and lived on the coastline for all of my life, and I'd say probably been in hurricane force winds about 10 or 15 times. So, you know, put it another way, if your family had a 20% chance of going onto an airplane that would crash, would you put them on that plane? So that's the kind of consequences we're talking about. High impact event, 20%, 30% chances, fairly high numbers. So this is the storm surge, and as I say, right now we're sticking with the Category 2 storm surge until we know that the storm is not going to come up the east coast of Florida. Given that, the values that you see there on the right-hand side are pretty much what we expect for any particular location. And I do want to emphasize that flooding in downtown Jacksonville, San Marco, and Riverside. Other places that would be very prone to the flooding would be St. Simon's Island in the Village area, the Morningstar Marina area, Frederica Yacht Club. Those are very, very exposed to the types of winds that we'll be seeing associated with the storm if it follows the current forecast track. And this is the storm tide for Georgia. So once again, if you look into the St. Simon's Island area, Sea Isle area, you can see it kind of juts out a little bit and is very, very susceptible to storm surges coming in from that direction with an inland moving storm. Heavy rainfall, we're looking at about 10 to 12 inches of rain along the coastline. Inland areas, you can see about 5 to 10 inches of rain. So this could cause some flooding problems, especially in places like 3rd Street in Jacksonville and the College Park area in the city of Brunswick, areas where we see problems with drainage when there's heavy rainfall and high tides. This is the area where we potentially could see tornadoes, but bear in mind this could shift. This could go further west if the storm tracks more towards Appalachia Bay, or this can come further east if the storm tracks closer to the Florida East Coast. So you can read this graphic of main points for yourself, but in summary, right now things tend to look better with the forecast track that we would only see a Category 1 hurricane to strong tropical storm, and I say only because of the very serious conditions that we will see down across the southern part of the state of Florida. However, any track that is further to the east that comes up the eastern seaboard changes this dynamic very, very seriously, and you still need to heed the advice of local officials and emergency managers. At this time, it's best to err on the side of caution. This is a very, very dangerous storm, and we have seen many shifts associated with the forecast over the last couple of days. Well, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.